Even though John Bolton is out of the White House, it seems like the saber rattling with Iran and the calls for war with Iran continue. It's of course no surprise because John Bolton was replaced with John Bolton 2.0, effectively, Robert C. O'Brien, who worked with John Bolton and praised Mitt Romney.
Who would you like to see Secretary of State? I would imagine Governor Romney.
I'd love to see Governor Romney as Secretary of State. I think John Bolton, who I also worked for, would make a great Secretary of State. But I think Mitt brings a level of gravitas. He's a statesman. He's recognized around the world.
The truth is that Tucker Carlson is absolutely correct for calling out the neoconservatives in our government. He's also correct in calling out the neoconservative citizens who call for war with Iran. The neoconservative citizens, some of whom work for places like the New York Times, like Bret Stephens, who once said that Israel will never be safe in an America First world. He's absolutely correct to call them out because a full-scale war with Iran, while not likely to happen, does not benefit the U.S. at all. As a matter of fact, we have more pressing issues happening here at home, like, I don't know, the cartels who recently just killed yet another American family, and the thousands upon thousands of deaths that occur by overdose from the drugs that are flowing across the U.S. and Mexican border. Tucker Carlson recently talked about this on his show, and talked about the saber-rattling that is happening with Iran while calling out the recent strikes. We're going to get to that now.
These were threats that were located in the region.
Threats in the region. If you don't live in Washington, here's the translation. That would be in hostile Middle Eastern countries, places where American troops would never be in the first place were it not for the insistent demands of non-geniuses like Max Boot and John Bolton. But never mind. No one in Washington is in mood for big picture questions right now, questions the obvious ones like, is Iran really the greatest threat we face, and who's actually benefiting from this, and why are we continuing to ignore the decline of our own country in favor of jumping into another quagmire from which there is no obvious exit? By the way, if we're still in Afghanistan 19 years later, what makes us think there's a quick way out of Iran? And so on. Nobody is thinking like that right now. Instead, chest beaters like Senator Ben Sasse of Nebraska are making the usual warlike noises, the ones they always make. This is very simple, Ben Sasse wrote in a statement last night. General Soleimani is dead because he was an evil bastard who murdered Americans, which is essentially true. Soleimani was certainly a bad guy. But does that make killing him, quote, very simple? It does not. Nothing about life, and certainly nothing about killing, is ever very simple, and any politician who tells you otherwise is dumb or is lying. Yes, Soleimani was linked to the deaths of Americans. Nobody mourns his passing. But Mexico and China are also linked to the deaths of Americans. Each has flooded our country with narcotics from which tens of thousands of Americans die every single year. Not that anyone in power cares. So does that mean we get to bomb Oaxaca? Can we start assassinating generals in the People's Liberation Army? Maybe. Maybe Ben Sasse will call for that, too. He's a former consultant and a very tough character.
Of course, after that segment aired by Tucker Carlson, someone named Matt Gertz, who's married to Alyssa Rosenberg, who works for Media Matters, came out and effectively called Tucker Carlson anti-Semitic for opposing war with Iran. Very weird. I'm sure you could figure that one out. But the mantra that Soleimani was responsible for killing hundreds of Americans and Iran is responsible for killing thousands of Americans, as Tucker Carlson pointed out, isn't actually exactly confirmed. As a matter of fact, this talking point originally comes from Dick Cheney. And I'm not sure that we can trust a lot of what Dick Cheney says. Also, there have been no Iran-sponsored terrorist attacks on U.S. soil for the past 25 to 30 years, but there have been many Sunni-sponsored terror attacks on U.S. soil, and Saudi Arabia is still, of course, our ally. And of course, as Tucker Carlson pointed out as well, we have thousands of people who are dying every single year by drug overdoses from the drugs that the Mexican cartels send over the U.S.-Mexican border, outside of the fact that American families are directly killed by cartels all the time, it seems, with a recent one happening as well. We also have tweets like this one, quote, "Let me ask you a legit question. What would your response be to Iran blowing up our drone, killing 600 soldiers, wounding hundreds more, burning oil fields, sabotaging 6 oil tankers, killing an American contractor, and invading our embassy?" Well, my question back to you would be, what would you do if you found out that Israel, for instance, firebombed U.S. installations, killing American citizens? Would your response be to bomb them? Because if so, this actually happened. Just look at the Lavon affair and check that out for yourself. Now, there are other people who are saying that we are justified in taking out Iran and conducting a regime change there because, well, they kill gay people or something. Well, what about the South African farmers who are being killed just because they're white? South African politicians have gotten up on stage and called for literally slitting the throat of whiteness at certain points. BLF members have called openly for killing white women, children, and their dogs. What would your response be to that? Now, of course, others are still claiming that Iran is the biggest sponsor of terror and they're the biggest sponsor of terror attacks on U.S. soil. But yet, the fact is that there have been 0 Iran-sponsored terrorist attacks on U.S. soil, but several hundred by Sunni Muslims. Almost every 9/11 hijacker was a Saudi Arabian national, and yet they are one of our greatest allies in the Middle East. Go figure. We still sell weapons to them, as a matter of fact.
Striking is how many people appear to accept this uncritically. Just the other day, you remember, our intel agencies were considered politically tainted and suspect. Certainly on this show they were, and will be for quite some time. Keep in mind, these are the people who invented excuses to spy on the Trump campaign purely because they didn't like Donald Trump's foreign policy views. And they're the ones who pretended he was a Russian agent in order to keep him from governing. Remember that? Russiagate? Our friends in the intel community did that. And by the way, these are the same people who lied about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction way back in 2002, and by doing that, got us into an utterly pointless war that dramatically weakened our country. The people pushing conflict with Iran are the same people who did that. It seems like about 20 minutes ago, we were denouncing these very people as the deep state and pledging never to trust them again without verification. But now, for some reason, we do seem to trust them implicitly and completely. In fact, we believe whatever they tell us, no matter how outlandish. Iran did 9/11, they're telling us. Oh, okay. Didn't know that. 15 of the 19 hijackers were from Sunni Saudi Arabia. None were from Shiite Iran. But if you say so, Mr. Unnamed CIA official, I'm happy to send my kid to the Middle East a week after Christmas on the basis of your anonymous and unverified leak to the New York Times. You've earned my trust through years of lying to me. That appears to be our position now. Now, maybe all this will turn out fine in the end. We're certainly praying for it. We love this country. But in the meantime, pardon the skepticism.
Now, other claims that I've seen are Soleimani was a very bad dude, and this is the reason why he was taken out and why we were justified in taking him out, possibly causing a full-scale war with Iran. Not likely, but possibly causing a full-scale war with Iran. And, you know, this is the reason why you're wrong, and you stand with the terrorists if you oppose this. Now, he may have been a very bad dude. I don't know. I really don't care about Soleimani, but there is proof, though, that the U.S. used to supply arms to him, and U.S. Commander Tommy Franks fought alongside him in the war in Afghanistan. So, used to be a friend, all of a sudden he's a really bad dude, and this is the reason why we need to take him out. Also, the 600 deaths of Americans caused by Soleimani, once again, this is a Dick Cheney talking point, and it originally comes from Dick Cheney. Like I said, I don't think that we should really trust too much of what Dick Cheney has said. Now, a war with Iran would not benefit America. Overthrowing Syria would not benefit America. But who would it benefit, though? This is a question that Tucker Carlson was asking. Well, pretty much only Israel.
Is a Republican representing the state of Mississippi, and he joins us tonight. Senator, thanks for coming on. What is the American national security interest that would be served by regime change in Syria?
Well, if you care about Israel, you have to be interested at least in what's going on in Syria.
This is from Haaretz Analysis. Netanyahu's Iran dilemma, getting Trump to act without putting Israel on the front line. Seems like they were successful in that. Of course, we have Ted Cruz's tweet here. It is long overdue justice for our Israeli allies, the killing of Soleimani. Pompeo once said that God may have sent Trump to save Israel from Iran. Very interesting there. And of course, we have from the Jerusalem Post, Trump, we have to protect Israel. And this is the reason why we need to stay in Syria. This is something that John Bolton parroted. And of course, we have the Los Angeles Times, which reported that Israel had advance notice of U.S. plan to kill Iranian general before even Congress knew what was going to happen, apparently. This article here from U.S. Business Insider, the U.S. and Israel reportedly signed a secret pact to take on Iran. Very secret there. Then we have WikiLeaks, who posted an email that was forwarded by Hillary Clinton, who said that the, quote, best way to help Israel is to overthrow the regime of Bashar al-Assad in Syria. Am I against doing things that benefit U.S. interests and make the U.S. safer and make our life better here? No, absolutely, I'm not against that at all. For instance, I'm for the tariffs on Chinese goods. I am for the sanctions on North Korea. I am for, of course, going into Mexico and absolutely BTFOing the cartels right now. This would benefit the U.S. more so than a war with Iran or taking out Soleimani, which, as I've said, only really benefits Israel. But a larger war with Iran is completely against the U.S. interests. For instance, if you look at our military, I was told by former military personnel and people who've worked in the National Security Department before that the IQs of the U.S. military are going down. The technology is subpar. We cannot afford another one of these never-ending, forever wars in the Middle East while we have problems here at home. It would be absolutely catastrophic to America to enter another war with Iran. I'm not against pursuing U.S. interests. I'm not against this at all. But this war would not pursue America's interests. It would pursue Israel's interests and making them a better country and making their lives easier. We already give them $3 billion a year. As a matter of fact, Trump said this himself, that Israel can protect themselves. Why do we have to keep fighting their wars for them? We give them billions of dollars a year. They can defend themselves. We give them all sorts of technology. They can defend themselves. It's time that we actually call out the real enemy to America, and that, of course, is the invasion that is happening on our southern border. This map explains it quite easily for you. As you can see, your army is here. The invaders are here on the southern border. But once again, we don't see any neoconservatives calling for war with the Mexican cartels or the Mexican government, who work with the cartels pretty much directly. Now, do we?